Have a richer life, not only in my bank account, but my heart account, my impact account, my family account, my relationships account, every account. So you're not just rich, but you're wealthy, because there's a difference between richness and wealth. My name is Navdeep Pasricha, means new light. Where I'm from is a great question. My ancestors are Indian, had my childhood in Malaysia, my teenagehood in Australia, and now I live nomadically, and Bali really tickles me to come back to her a lot.
In terms of business, I know you've had several in the past. Now you're working on a new project. What business are you currently working on, and what business have you had in the past?
Yeah, it's a great question. I know you mentioned that a lot of people who tune into this have a background in corporate, in finance, and tech. And what's really interesting is I used to run a tech startup. I wanted to be in the VC space. I was on the road to qualifying as a financial planner. And so I used to be a systems consultant. So all these very analytical spaces are where I used to work at. So I can really empathize. And now I'm really excited. I help people who already have a level of success and they want to deepen their success, but do so in a way that's more meaningful to them. I show them how to do this through a body of work we call connected intelligence. It's really for that person who has a track record, they have success, and now they're asking, now what?
Before we go into that business, that journey of being in the tech space, the startup world, the VC world, how was that? And then what prompted this change into what you're doing now?
It was beautiful. It was beautiful. It's like God was revealing pieces to me step by step. And what I mean by this is, when I was in the startup world, what I realized is what I actually loved, and I'll be really frank with you, it wasn't as much of interfacing with clients. It was more so interfacing and interacting with the tech community. Because at least at that time when I was deep in it, I was organizing events, I was judging startup weekends, I was on a judging panel with a judge from Shark Tank, Steve Baxter, and I had a community of 700 young entrepreneurs. Wow. What I loved the most, Michael, was the energy. People were waking up saying, hey, I can change the world. Hey, I want to create it different. And sometimes when they told me the idea, I was like, this is crazy. Like, it was like Uber for cats or something like that, But they had so much passion. There's so much life force energy in them. There's so much rasa. It's an Indian word for energy. And this is what really I fell in love with, right? And so that was in the tech space and in the VC space. When I was in like systems consulting, I was working with speakers who were already doing in the early seven figures, which, as you know, is $1 million to seven figures. So they were in the early stages and they wanted to scale to later stage seven figure. And so I would help them scale up their systems, be it how their teams interacted, be it their reporting on their dashboards and things like this. And again, whilst I was good at it, what I loved was the energy of we're going to change the world like this. Make sense? And so eventually I bit the bullet, or God helped me bite the bullet in the idea of, hey, Navdeep, how many times do I have to share with you what is it that you truly love before you go all in on that?
Why is energy so important to you?
I mean, like, if we think back to our most memorable moments of life, if you remember it now, right? The moments of hardship, the moments of struggle, the moments of triumph, the moments of tribulation, the moments of tenacity, the moments of absolute delight. These are all feelings. And emotion, as Tony Robbins says, is energy in motion. And so, if you've heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think it's after a certain amount of money, after you get your basic needs met and then some, the yields of more money is incremental, not exponential. And so I typically work with people who are already financially stable, and now they're asking, what's next? And for them, it's really how do the licks of the ice cream become tastier? How do the smells of the rose become more succulent? How do the pieces of the water that fall on them in the shower become more meaningful? After you're financially stable, yes, you want to grow. Yes, there's a next level. Yes, there's expansion. And what I find is that to a certain point of survival, people are scaling by grind, which means it's how hard do I work? Gary Vee, how much content do I put out? I got a 10x. And that's important. What happens next is they scale by mind. And I really see you master this, the systems, the frameworks, the processes, the intellect. It is your mind. And then there's a deeper level, isn't there? Once you scale by grind, once you scale by mind, then you start asking different questions of how can I have a richer life, not only in my bank account, but my heart account, my impact account, my family account, my relationships account, every account. So you're not just rich, but you're wealthy. Because there's a difference between richness and wealth. And, I was just in Dubai and I found that people there have generational wealth. I mean, like they go back kings and queens, and they have a different energy about them. You can feel it versus somebody who's new rich versus somebody who's up and coming. They hold themselves completely different. And what I found, do I mean this? Yeah. The people who are truly wealthy, they're not scaling by grind or mind. They have elements of this, but for the majority of time, they're scaling by grace.
What do you think most people get wrong about energy? Or
Yeah.
what do you think most people get trapped by energy?
I really like the way that you refine the question to trapped, because when people learn a tool, it's like, do they rule the tool or does the tool rule them? And I know one way that I got trapped in energy was I learned a bunch of tools. So when I was 16 years old, my parents sent me to a Tony Robbins youth camp, the speaker Tony Robbins, and I fell in love. Like I trained with the same mentor who trained him in NLP. I went all in. And one of the things you learn there is how do you emotionally regulate, which is a big trend word, nervous system regulation and like change your state or emotional intelligence or peak performance state, right? These are all words that describe similar things. And what's interesting is I've now spoken in 16 countries over the last decade in the flesh and on every continent. And what I've noticed is that there's a time and place to emotionally regulate, but there's also another concept which when I first heard of back in 2016, I helped organize actually like an intimate circle, 12 people with a senior engineering director from Facebook. So he was like tight with Mark Zuckerberg, and I think he helped take Facebook mobile. Imagine Facebook. Yeah, wow. And he said that he engaged a psychologist so that it would increase his performance. And so what did I do a month later? I engaged a psychologist, right? And this psychologist, I still remember her. She was like this short lady, short hair. She had Persian background, the sort of smile that makes you feel like warm milk and honey, right? We were talking about honey earlier. Anyways, she first exposed me to the concept of acceptance commitment therapy, which is actually by an Australian. And to answer your question of how do people get trapped, they get trapped in the idea that they need to change their emotions. And that is one tool. But another tool is how do you allow it? How do you allow the emotions? So let me give you an example. This morning we were talking, it's my birthday today, and my beautiful former partner called me, right? And I've never received this kind of love before, where a former partner calls me on my birthday. How beautiful. I've received texts and voice messages, but to receive a call, there's a deeper level of intimacy, right? And so part of me was so touched. I can feel myself like tears welling up. I was so touched that this woman loves me so much that she's able to share with me that, I guess, unconditional grace. And part of me was like, oh my God, I'm not ready to talk to her yet. We only finished 2 months ago, and it was here in Bali. I actually moved here to build that relationship. And so when I came back to Bali this time, I was like, oh, and I'm actually, today I'm going to Ubud, which is where we were based. And so I was like, I'm not ready. And so part of me is like, you know what, Navdeep, I can change my state. I can do some breathing. I can regulate my nervous system. I can do all these things, or I can just allow that energy to move through me. Because it's like a child. If your child is screaming their head off and you tell them to shut up, they're probably going to scream more. And we all have that inner child within us. So before this episode, you were so kind. You let me have a watermelon juice, which I love. Thank you so much. And, on the bike here, I was allowing. And then whilst you were doing the watermelon juice, I recorded the video sharing with her how I feel, sharing I'm not ready, sharing I'm so thankful and I love her as a friend. And this allowance, it creates more space for grace. It creates more space for you to make better decisions. It creates more space for you to be more effective in your communication. And it creates more space for you to focus on scaling your everything.
Speaking of scale, you mentioned that the work that you did was helping early stage seven figures go to later stage seven figures. What were some of the barriers that trap people from going, just say, from 1 million to 9 million?
Yeah, dude. This is so interesting, right? I always thought it was strategy and systems. So I would show them like how to have stand-up meetings, I would create dashboards for them for all their data in one place. I show them how to have better like bottleneck mitigation strategies. I'd show them all these strategic things. But then, bro, when their relationship was crumbling, or they were on the brink of divorce, like I'm talking people like people would come to them asking for advice, saying, you're my role model. And to the outside world, they were widely successful in their achievements. But what I find is that when you have a foundation of success, the key handbrake is actually what's happening outside of your business. It's your relationship that's crumbling. It's the idea that your kids think you don't spend enough time with them. It's you've actually lost the spark for what you do because you didn't get into this to become a manager, right? And so what I find is that when I help people shift that, the overwhelming energy, the overwhelming inspiration, the overwhelming spark for when they started out comes back online. They feel more alive. And it's like when you're in love. When you're in love, you can tell somebody has a spring in their step. Somebody has this joy inside of them, right? And if I can help somebody fall back more in love with their life as a holistic life, as a human being, then this translates to more energy in their business, which translates to more scale.
And you did this for how long?
Systems consulting?
Yeah.
Yeah, great question. So systems consulting was 2020. I started in 2021. And then the tech space I was in from 2016.
And navigating that for the tech space and the systems consultancy for 5-6 years.
Yeah. Half a decade.
What were some of the pivotal moments or challenges that you think shaped you into doing what you're doing now?
Thanks for asking. It's probably my moments of heartbreak, bro. Like when, it's so beautiful that these people trusted me. And I'm connected with a fair few of them still today. In fact, I have a lot of space for them in my heart. Is that true? Yeah. And it was just a heartbreak that when we would catch up at a cafe and we'd have a heart-to-heart, they would share with me the broader reality of what was going on in their life. And so I don't know if you've ever had clients that you actually look up to. I do. I was like fangirling my clients, which is an interesting dynamic. But the fact is that I looked up to them. And then I realized that the path I was on at that time, the trajectory, would not lead me to what I truly wanted. And that was heartbreaking. And that's what got me to question. In fact, I remember once in 2021, I was presenting also almost 3 times a day. Yeah. Like giving workshops, training people, whether it's like emotional intelligence, sales, well-being, whatever it is. And so I would get pumped up and I'd be so excited. Literally, I remember this day. It's July 2021. We're in an office. I have like, this headset so I can like perform to a audience online. And I remember July 2021, I'm, yeah. And then I go to the bathroom. I lock myself in a cubicle in the bathroom and I crouch down on the floor like this, sitting. And I just start crying and wailing. Because I remember on my sister's birthday, July 21st, 2021, somebody I was in love with, she sent me a voice message to break up. And so you can imagine how strenuous it was. Yes. Yes. And I realized like, oh my gosh, you know what? It's actually our connections in life that determine the richness of it. Let me give you an example. At the time, I had lots of friends who were in the $1 million mark, 7 figures, but I had only one friend who was a billionaire. Okay. He's very private individual. So we'll call him Mudra. That's not his real name, but he's very private. And we met because we were both giving a guest talk at a high school on entrepreneurship. And he went from $1 billion valuated company, IPO, like stock exchange. And within like 3 weeks, his stock price plummeted. He got basically canceled online. There was so much controversy. If you know, like there was a company that shorted him. And they would like create all these Twitter bots to like say bad things about him and like have bad press and like paint him as a villain. And I saw his whole life crumble. Lots of his peers distanced himself from him. His stock price went down. I saw the man defeated. And he was a hero in the startup world, right? And then I asked myself, how come he could rebuild? How come he could today be doing things that were much more meaningful to him? He could rebuild that sense of success and reputation. And it's because he had that foundation of connection, Michael. He had deep connection with his wife, with his family, with his close friends, and with something bigger than him, a mission bigger than him, a source bigger than him, I believe. And I was like, what can I learn from this billionaire's ups and downs and their build back up? And it was really, if you want a rich life, you need rich connections.
We'll get back to the podcast in 1 minute, but I just wanted to let you know the sponsor of this week's episode, which is me. So I've got a free 5-day email course that will help anyone with a 9-to-5 or a beginner solopreneur start and scale their business to $1,000 per month. So you can find the link in the description in this podcast episode. Click on it. It's free to sign up. You'll get 5 emails from me teaching you and walking you through how to start your one-person business and make your first $1,000 per month recurring. So I'll see you there, and thank you for listening to this episode. In that journey of shifting from establishing yourself in the tech sector, the startup world, the speaking world, how did you handle the transition?
Oh, thanks for asking. At first, it was really hard. Like, COVID happened. All my speaking engagements got cancelled. Family business was strenuous. I was in the most painful relationship I've ever been, and we used to spend every day together because it was COVID. Like, it was shit. It was crazy. So that was transition 1. I had no choice.
How did you handle all the fear, self-doubt, and potential judgment and expectations? So you've established yourself as a leader in one sector.
You know, it was so interesting. I once invited my first mentor in the tech space to come to an event in the space I'm playing in now. And we were attending an event together, and it was a 4-day event, and I invited him as my guest. I got a free ticket I could give to him, right? So it's a 4-day event. And on lunchtime at day 1, he said, "Navdeep, I'm not coming back." Whoa. Somebody I respected, my hero in the tech world, like the person I was closest with, like he was like my big brother, rejected the space I'm currently in. The idea of energy, the idea of the unseen, the idea of things that are beyond just our intellect, right? And this hit me hard. Later, we had lunch, and I understood his point of view, and he understood mine. And he said, "Navdeep, I don't agree with you, but I still respect you." You know? But I remember how scared I was of his disapproval. And so that's, I guess, the way and that isn't the case always. I've had people walk out of my events and we don't have a repair conversation like that. You know, a great question that a mentor asked me is, where am I giving my power away?
That's a great question. What did you value 5 years ago that you no longer value now?
So this is an interesting question, hey, because I still valued a lot of the same things, but they had different meanings to me. So for example, I valued dating the hottest girl I knew because it meant that I was more of a man. It gave me a sense of validation. I valued making a certain amount of money. Like I remember when I broke the 6-figure mark, I thought I was king of the world because it was a validation point. Make sense? I valued telling people that I traveled so much because it validated me. And is this true? I don't know if this is true, but what I've noticed is that this journey is quite common. Somebody is proving something. Make sense? They're proving themselves. And even if you listen to rhetoric like, I don't know, Andrew Tate and Hamza, and not so much Hamza, Andrew Tate and people like that, they're like, you got to make something of yourself. And Jordan Peterson, if you're a man in this world, you got to make something of yourself, man. The first 10 years of your life, you got to eat shit. Gary Vee, you got to eat cardboard, man. So to answer your question, I value the same things. I still want to be in a beautiful relationship with a woman, right? But the reason I want it is the intrinsic joy that I'll get from it. I still want to increase my levels of financial wealth, right? But it's more for the opportunities that I get to experience as opposed to other people seeing me experience them. Do I still have a need for significance and status? Yes, we all do. I want to be famous. I want to have the level of influence. I want to be on the New York bestselling time. I want to be Forbes 730. Make sense? But maybe, just maybe, is this true? Yeah, fully true. Yeah, the ratio is different. It's like, I want the experience first. And then, dude, I don't understand that. I was like at the Blue Mosque in Turkey maybe 3 months ago, and I went there to connect, and I got to pray there as well, which is such a privilege. And there were these influencers. I was there for like almost 2 hours, and they were taking photos in the same spot when I went in, and when I came out, they were in the same spot. I was having dinner here at what's the name of the place? It's in Butterbelong. Anyways, Penny Lane, that's right. It's a beautiful place, like these like fairy lights, statues, fountain, music, such a vibe, right? Pool table. And right next to me were these 2 influencers. And for the majority of my meal, they were taking photos in the same pose. Like this one girl did this one thing for like half hour. That's like, what is going on? How can you taste the delicacy of the food and be preoccupied with what other people think at the same time? It must be really hard. And I get it. It's their job. It's their occupation. But what I'm saying is, to me, I want the food to melt in my mouth, and that's the priority. And then letting other people into that is the secondary priority.
What's the most valuable skill you needed to succeed as a solopreneur, entrepreneur, and or digital nomad, whichever label or title you want to use?
Sales. Absolutely. Sales.
What particular part of sales? Because this was brought up in another podcast yesterday.
God.
What's part of sales for you did you really need to work up?
I guess that kind of three main parts, right? Prospecting, which is how do people discover that you exist? Qualifying, which is how do the right people get into a conversation with you? And enrolling, which is how do those people then become clients? I don't think one can exist without the other.
What are the biggest mistakes you see most solopreneurs and digital nomads make?
Oh, yeah, lack of community, dude. Community is everything. Like I was a beautiful friend of mine, right? We reconnected. So Michael and I, we first connected 6 years ago in a completely different space. We were at a forum about the future of education of Australia and the future of young people, something like that, right? Anyways, so we connected in that space. And then we ran into each other a couple of days ago here in Bali, and God had different parts of us. By the way, when I use the word God, whatever your concept is of a higher power, source, universe, energy, masculine, feminine, spaghetti monster, it's all welcome, okay? We all have our different relationships with the divine. So maybe I can use the word divine. Maybe. So, to answer your question, the biggest mistake is a lack of cultivated community. Conducive or cultivated. So what I mean by this is I was at Brekkie with a friend of mine I hadn't seen in 10 years from university. Okay, maybe 9 years. And she was like, I want to break into this space of solopreneurship. And like, you know, she's really passionate about veganism. And how do I monetize this? And I was, and to her, it was like a whole new world. But to me, most of the people I hang out with in the thought leader space are doing at least $1 million. Like it's the normal, you know? So to me, like whilst energetically I still have some resistance, it's more feasible than not. Does that make sense? But to her, it was like, and so surrounding yourself with the right people is important. They say you are like this average of the 5 friends you surround yourself with. I don't completely agree with that. I think there's a nuance. You can have somebody who's a peer and not a friend. Does that make sense? So like right now, you and I have more of a peer relationship that could develop into a friendship. Make sense? People are like, I have to leave my old friends, or I'm like, no, you can have friends who are personal friends and you can have professional peers. They can be different, you know? Sometimes my best friend in the whole world, she happens to be a peer as well. She's a former client of mine. And yeah, my best friend, she's pregnant. It's really exciting. But to answer your question succinctly, it is the question to ask that most solopreneurs don't ask themselves is, where can I connect with loving leaders in the space I'm devoting my energy to?
What's a big trend in the future of work that you think most people are not talking about?
Loneliness. Yeah. Loneliness. The first solo trip I ever did, Michael, the first solo trip I ever did for tourism, specifically, not a conference or a work thing, was in Zanzibar, in Tanzania, in Africa. I was this close to move to Africa. And I met a lady there, and she was doing a master's thesis on digital nomads and their well-being, specifically in Zanzibar. And what she found is that most digital nomads would leave Zanzibar because there wasn't a sense of community or connection. I mean, think about it, right? You could work on your laptop all day. I bet you, we're here at the co-working space. It's thebomb.com. And I bet you there are people here who spend the whole day on their laptop not talking to anybody. And that's okay. But then who are they talking to when they get home? Who are they touching, right? In a consensual, healthy, sometimes platonic way, right? Who are they touching? As human beings, we are social animals. Healthy touch is important. Healthy connection is important. Eye contact, not just on the screen, is important. And so what I feel like people are not talking about is loneliness. Let me give you an example. When I was speaking at Mind Valley, which is it's a conference that mixes entrepreneurship, technology, and spirituality in one. And it was in Estonia. I was speaking there in July. And I ran a private session after hours. And somebody who was there, he was the co-founder of a tech company that's worth $10 billion. It's like, wow, man, that's pretty cool. Anyways, what we realized is that the more connected he could feel in his relationship with his kids and his partner, the more that he could bring into his work. Make sense? And so there's even this saying that it's lonely at the top. Does it have to be? I've experienced it, but it doesn't have to be. There was a time where flying airplanes was crazy. Surely we can fix the loneliness epidemic.
What advice would you give for someone just starting out on their solopreneurship/digital nomad journey?
Yeah, the rooms you're in really matter. 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 The rooms you really, really matter. Do you know Y Combinator? Yeah, so Y Combinator is a startup accelerator, meaning it's a mentorship program. I think Airbnb, who else? Facebook? Square? I'm not sure. Anyway, some Uber maybe. It's known as one of the top 2 accelerators in the whole world, right? And I got to visit their headquarters by surprise because I was having a meeting with somebody who his name was Toro Arero, a Nigerian guy. And he used to, what's his name? Peter Draper? Peter Drucker? Yeah, Peter Drucker. He used to head up Peter Drucker's fund for Africa. He was the head of Africa, right? And I got to meet him outside Y Combinator. He was there for an investors day. The Australian government flew me to Silicon Valley because they acknowledged me as a community leader in the tech space. And I met with Toro, and I didn't know it'd be outside Y Combinator, so it was a nice surprise. And he told me, Navdeep, if there's one thing that I would recommend to you, and this is like back in 2018, actually. There's one thing. He said, find the place in the world that is the mecca, meaning the hub, meaning the hotspot for the industry or the game that you're in, and go there. And amazing things will happen when you connect with people there. That's my advice.
What are the 1 to 3 most impactful books you've ever read? Doesn't have to be business.
Thank you. Let's think. The first one would be The Course of Love. It's by a philosopher called Alain de Botton. Have you heard of the videos, The School of Life? Yeah, and it talks about, it follows the story of this couple from age like 20 till 60, and it gives you lessons along the way, and it's really beautiful. It's really eye-opening. That was the first one. So, the second one is one I read recently, which is called Bittersweet. And it talks about how in a fast-paced world, how can we have space for our shared humanity so that the journey becomes more enjoyable and tastier? Bittersweet by Susan McCain, I think. And the third one, yeah, The Kite Runner. I think it's by a Persian novelist. It's a really great book. Yeah, it helps you understand how lucky we are here. I've traveled to... Dude, this one time I was in Kenya and I bought some people some grain so they could make food. I literally saw people fighting over food, in front of me. Verbally, but still, when there are people in the world who are fighting over the world, sometimes I forget that we are already part of the 1%, just to be sitting here.
Knowing what you know now about your journey, what advice would you give to your 21-year-old self?
Oh my gosh, that's a good question.
Now that you're 28 today.
Now that I'm 28, my 7-year cycle begins. That God has a plan for you. And the more that you can lead into love, the more that love will lead into you.
Is there any final message you want to leave with the audience?
Yeah, I'd love to invite people. I really enjoy Michael's vibe. And if you're in Michael's community, it means that a part of you is driven and part of you is committed to being the best version of yourself. And so I'd love to reward that with a copy of my book. So typically people buy this and they can buy it. But if you find me on Instagram and you message me the word Solopreneur Launch, so I know that you're part of Michael's community. So you can thank Michael for this, for trusting him. You get good things for trusting Michael, right? I'm happy to share a copy of my book at no charge, a soft copy, like a digital copy. But yeah, just message me the word Solopreneur Launch, and that way you can understand more about how you can use Michael's strategies, and then you can use my wisdom when it comes to enjoying the juice of the journey even more. Because at the end of the day, there's a book called The Regrets of the Dying. And I think it talks about one of the deepest regrets was not enjoying the journey with people you love. It's what people hated the most about when they died. So don't be that person, and send me the word Solopreneur Launch. Mwah.
Hello, friends, and thank you again for listening to this week's episode of the podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard and got value from the podcast, I would love for you to share it with a friend who also wants to start, grow, and scale their solopreneur business or on their own one-person business journey. And if you could like and subscribe, that would be amazing. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time. Bye.